I still remember the anxiety of those early veterinary career days, second guessing myself, feeling like I had to have all the answers, and wondering if I was really cut out for this. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. Ready Vet Go is the mentorship program I wish I had. A 7-month journey with live mentorship, community, and real world skills to help you grow your confidence. It's perfect for early career vets and anyone making a transition into small animal practice, but anyone is welcome to join. New cohorts start in July and October, and you can get 10% off with the code SPRINKLE at readyvetgo.co. You don't have to figure it out alone. Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. About 2% of veterinarians are Black. Even fewer are Black males. But our guest today is here to represent. Raised by a single mother in Brooklyn, Dr. Tarron Herring's childhood and early adolescence was full of challenging circumstances, but he had the dream to become a veterinarian from a young age. I will let him share his full story, but I hope this conversation shows possibilities in veterinary medicine in a whole new way. He is now living a long dream of practice ownership. In May, he opened Pet Vet 365 at General Practice in Philadelphia. He is also a motivational speaker with a particular heart to encourage men. He is an entrepreneur, father of 3 girls, educator, and author of several books, which we will link in the description below. So let's get to this powerful conversation with Dr. Tarron Herring. When did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
Around the age of 9. And kind of how that developed was I witnessed a dog in a neighborhood getting hit by a car. And just, the seed planted in me that I wish I could do something for that dog. And so after that, just, my mom, she would always watch animal shows. And so that was a connection point for me and my mom. We would sit down and watch animal shows, and that kind of helped, to fuel the fire and the desire to go into veterinary medicine. But, you know, the environment that I was in wasn't necessarily an environment where I had access to veterinarians. And so it was always kind of like this big dream, and I wasn't sure if I could reach it and to hold on to it as long as possible. And I recall going to one veterinarian in the neighborhood in Brooklyn and just trying to get some exposure. I just said, hey, I don't want to be paid. I just want to exposure, and I'll clean your kennels, I'll sweep, I'll do whatever you want. Can I just, shadow? And unfortunately I got turned down. And now that I'm a veterinarian, I can understand some of that. There's some legal aspects that go with that, right? But at that point in time, I didn't quite understand it. And so it kind of put a little damper for a little bit. And I wasn't quite sure if I would be able to achieve this big dream that I wanted, and it wasn't until I got into college that I met my first veterinarian.
Yeah, no, that speaks volumes to you being able to kind of put this picture together without it being so clearly put in front of you. And I love that it was also a connection with your mom who, based off of what I know so much about you right now, is you probably had a very unique relationship with her. And to the extent that you feel comfortable, because again, as I was saying before we hit record, I think it's important for people to know what's possible and not to count themselves out. You had a very unique upbringing. You kind of talked about being in some unique situations. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how you grew up?
Yeah, so around that same age, my mother and father separated. And it was a pretty traumatic separation for me. I remember kind of hearing the argument, and then my father leaving, opening the door, and I recall running to him and holding on to his leg and, Daddy, please don't leave. And him rejecting me, kicking me off of his leg and saying, go to your mother. And that was that was the last time I saw my father for about 20 plus years. So that situation, and there's many that have gone through the same situation of growing up without a father and a father figure. And so what happened in that situation, as I was seeking identity and I was seeking guidance and leadership. My mother did the best that she could, but as a boy, you need to get from man in your life. And so that actually triggered me to go into and see it in the environment that I was in, right? I went in and joined a crew that then snowball effect, right? And so I ended up getting into some things that I shouldn't have done, right? And I ended up getting and from that point on, that triggered something in me that I needed to change, but I wasn't quite ready for it. So I still was kind of hanging out the same pool. And it was to a point where, I got kicked out of my first high school. So it was a journey, but I'm grateful for it kind of shaped me, build in me the spirit of perseverance and not giving up, and so I was introduced to a program for inner city youth. It's called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And when I was introduced to that program, before then, I was kind of just struggling, trying to hold on. My grades weren't the best, right? But in this, they help to prepare you for higher education, but also introduce you to things like business. And so I was so grateful to be introduced to this program because at that point, I was introduced to someone named Teresa. She was one of the instructors there. And she changed my life forever. She spoke life into me, that I had value, I had purpose, and that I could achieve this dream that I had. And so from that point on, she really kind of helped to mentor me and helped to get me into college. I got into Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. So that's kind of how the beginnings started.
That's a huge deal. And then, that the college years, of course, are the crucial part to prepare for veterinary medicine. And you mentioned that it wasn't until college until you met your first real veterinarian. So who was that? And were they small animal? Like, what did they do? And how did that kind of shape your thoughts around what your career could look like before you got into vet school?
Yeah, so I met three veterinarians actually at Lincoln University. But before then, as an African American child, going into a profession where there is, I never really saw, if I saw a veterinarian, they didn't look like me. And so holding on to that was definitely a challenge. But when I got to Lincoln University, I was introduced to three veterinarians, and more of them were practicing at the time. They were actually instructors for things like biology, science, and chemistry. So it was Dr. Royer, Dr. Ford, and so by meeting those three individuals, it really helped me. Dr. Ford is Caucasian. He really wrapped his arms around me that I wanted to be a veterinarian. All three of the veterinarians really poured into me in their own unique way. He really took me underneath his wing and introduced me to different programs that I could use it to. And he played a major role in me being able to move forward to veterinary school. So that was the first time that I got to see and say, hey, I can actually do this. There's vets that look like me and they're doing, so why can't I? And my wife, who's my college sweetheart, we met in college, and I was so motivated to this dream that I took 21 credits my first year. Anyone who goes into college, 12 credits your first semester, because they want to make sure that, you can get through this. I went bonker and my book bag was busting at the seams. And I really, really motivated to achieve this thing. I was so motivated in that I would literally go to class in the morning, and most times you would finish class by about 4. I would then just grab a bite to eat, maybe take a brief nap, and I would go right back to the classroom and study from 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock until 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I would do that every single day, including the weekends. My wife can verify that. And so it was pretty insane.
Were your dates study dates then?
Our dates were pretty much study dates. Yes. I was my wife's tutor.
Well, and I'm sure that dedication is probably what caught the attention of these veterinary mentors that you discussed was like, man, he is serious. So, that also probably gave them a lot of confidence that this is the kind of attitude that you need to make it as a veterinarian. Now, when you were, you had this dream in your mind of being a veterinarian, did you picture small animal veterinarian in private practice? What did that look like to you?
Yeah, that's a question. And I'm glad you asked it. So, into Tuskegee School of Veterinary Medicine, and I'm grateful for the education that I got there and the unique challenges that I was able to be exposed to there. And so I was the emergency student. So I got exposure to things early on, parvo and things like that. But I found myself having this passion towards the end of vet school for ophthalmology. And I did an internship with Dr. Ann White, and phenomenal ophthalmologist. I got to study underneath her for a little bit, and so sure, even to the point where in small animal, they asked me if I could teach the ECG students a little bit of ophthalmology. And so I did that for a little bit, which was awesome while I was in vet school. So, and my senior presentation was on all things eyes, right? And so I'm on the stage and I'm walking back and forth. I'm doing my thing, right? And, Megan, I couldn't be any further from ophthalmology. I still do love eyes, and I still do get excited about eyes, but I have fallen in love with preventative medicine. And that's where I'm kind of at right now, as well as things like mentorship and develop of young doctors as well. So that's kind of what things are right now.
Yeah. Well, not all veterinarians love eyes. So that rare case that comes in, I'm sure they're happy to give it to you. To follow his interest in preventative medicine, in 2007, Tarron joined a Banfield practice in Maryland. Interestingly, it was a male-dominated practice. He describes the practice as a fun environment where they would play tricks on each other.
So it was lots of fun. We did lots of silly things. The days were very, very interesting. But how I fell in love with preventative medicine is, I just have this passion, or a mentor telling me that, you know, when you're doing your exam on a patient, our job is to find what's wrong. And so then I settled that thought in my mind and took this approach with my patients that I want to prevent them from getting sick as much as I possibly can. And so the best way for me to do that is to approach them with the thought that there's something wrong. I need to prove myself wrong that they're 100% healthy. So every time I approach my patient, I'm taking detail, I'm really putting a lot of focus. And what I've found was that I then started to see that, I'll use my own dog, family dog as an example. Through preventative blood work, we were able to, Heidi was in renal failure. We would not have, discovered that without doing that routine blood work. I was then able to extend his life, right? And give him more joy and give more time with him. He eventually passed away due to it, but the fact that we were able to catch that and give additional life is something that really drove me to really want to do this more for more of my patients. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I hope I answered that question completely.
Oh, no, you did. Yeah. It does sound like your first environment, as a veterinarian was a very fun environment, as well as you had these opportunities to kind of see how you can impact the life of your patients and through that, your clients as well, as being able to be on that very front line of watching and making sure that you catch things as quickly as possible and try to, again, keep them as healthy as long as possible so you don't have to worry about more emergency situations. So
Yeah.
and you even shared that one story with me when we first spoke about the cat that presented that was pulling its hair out, and understanding that there's a lot to what we have to do is understanding our clients in the situation of our patient. I think
Yeah.
it looks like you remember this case. Do you want to share that real quickly? It sounded like it was an impactful
Yeah.
case for you.
Absolutely. And so along those lines, I approach um, veterinary patients. I approach them with a holistic approach, right? So not only am I doing an exam, as I said, from the rooter to the tutor, and clients, well, really, it tickles a lot when I say that, which is awesome. So that helps to kind of break the ice, but also understanding that there's a human component that comes with this, right? And a lot of veterinarians, we are laser focused on our patient that we're not really paying attention to that human that is attached, right? And a lot of our colleagues will say, if we ask them, why don't you go to vet med? Well, oh, I don't like people. And the truth of the matter is, you have to deal with people. And so with that particular patient, I like to have conversations with her about when I see these conditions that can be connected to stress, about how their home environment is, right? And so in this particular case, this cat was pulling its hair out. It turns out that the home environment was a stressful. I had to have a conversation with the owner about the way for me to treat your pet is to also have to play a partnership and play a role. And this person at home has to improve, right? Many of us just like, hey, you deal with your home stuff and best of luck. I do think that it is important, and we have a duty as veterinarians for this holistic approach. I'm not saying diagnose the owner. What I am saying is need to find out what's happening at home so that they're understanding and have a better chance of treating our patients appropriately. And so I'll have a real conversation and say, hey, unless the environment at home improves, you dealing with anxiety improves, it's going to be really hard for me to treat my patient. So whatever what you need to do in that situation, I want to bring it to your attention that in this partnership, that's the role that I need you to really work on, right? And so you'll be surprised, a lot of us are afraid to have that conversation because we're afraid of what the owners are going to say. And I will be very honest and transparent. I haven't had a single owners not thank me for that because ultimately they want to do what's better, but they don't realize that, hey, I might be contributing my pet's stress.
Yeah, I mean, and especially when it comes to cats, right? It could be the small, well, to
Yeah.
us, it seems like the smallest thing. And it's also nice to hear that from all your years of being a veterinarian, no one has gotten upset with you or defensive. It is more of a, oh, okay, that makes sense. I get it now. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Yeah.
It's about approach, right? And it's about how you say things, right? And to that, if you don't establish trust, right, it makes having those very important conversations hard. And so one thing make sure that I do is I establish trust with my pet owners. And that looks different for different, you know, but if we don't take the time to really deal with that human component of it, then it could be really, really challenging. Some of our colleagues are very, very abrupt, okay, and civil. If we're very abrupt, that can really make it challenging.
Yeah. Well, these are also things that I think are important when it comes to being a leader too. So,
Yeah.
building trust with the people that you work with. And you mentioned that's something that you're very passionate about now. And I can see that was a big trajectory for you within Banfield, is that you really became quite a leader. And maybe those business skills from high school came into play too, because you were not only successful on the human leadership side, but also from a business perspective. So, do you mind sharing a little bit of how your career grew and how you became the leader that you're proud of today?
Yeah. So it's definitely been a long journey, and I'm grateful for this journey. I've stepped into leadership roles, a director of veterinary quality for a number of years, and being able to really help develop young doctors and support. I really enjoyed spending time with my people. And I remember once saying, take people with you, right? You're on a journey, take people with you. And so what many of my doctors would, I wouldn't go in and say, hey, just fix that, fix this. I would go in and I would genuinely have a conversation with them. And many of the doctors I still am in contact with, even to move on and do a few different things with a profession. But just talking with them and the type of support I provided for them, and not only impacted them as a veterinarian, impacted them on this journey called life. And so I always lead with my heart, and I went on to held roles like director of operations, director of relations, director of strategic partnerships. It was a lot of fun. All these things I really enjoyed doing. It's all helped kind of me to the individual that I am, where now I'm stepping into actual ownership, which is a little different, right? But all those are playing a role in what I'll be able to do now with practice ownership. But I think that sometimes we try to fit people into what we think they should be. And what approach I've always taken is I want to help you be best you. And so, whatever that looks like, whatever your dream is, I'm not here to say, hey, you should do this. I'm here to help you really lean into how you see things and what you're doing, right? So, how can I support you to do that?
Yes, which is all that we're trying to discuss here on the podcast as well. So excited that you agree in trying to find everybody's unique path. And before we get too far, because I'm not quite sure where this fell for you, and I think that also helps us know how to lead others, is to kind of reflect on our own challenges through our career. And you were open with me, and you mentioned that you have gone through burnout. Do you mind sharing a little bit about when that was, kind of what happened? Because I think it's nice to see people on the other side who have gone through some of these hardships. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's actually a big part of my testimony.
Tarron was early in his career at the time, only 4 years in, still full of massive zeal to save lives and be the best veterinarian that he could be. He was promoted to chief of staff in a Banfield hospital that he described needing some love and care. And sadly, this was also the time he was dealing with 2 deaths in his family that hit him very hard, starting with his father.
My father, who I had, just rekindled this relationship with, finally found him, and he was saying, hey, I'm so sorry. I said, listen, I forgive you. Tell me who I am, right? And unfortunately, he got diagnosed with cancer, passed away soon after that. And so that left a void. As veterinarians, we try and push through and not really emotions, right? But then I had soon after that another death, and a brother that was sudden. He had a heart attack and passed away. And so those 2 deaths, and you couple that with the approach of I'm just going to push through, right? I'm not going to focus on that. I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. I just need to keep doing what I'm doing and keep moving forward, right? Well, one day it all kind of came to a head. And along with seeing these patients, I'm giving my heart every day and in my soul every day. And I remember being in an exam room, and it was a simple case of an ear infection. And for the life could not recall the term titus externa. I was stuck staring at the screen. And one of my great client was with me for a long time, said, "Are you okay?" And I stopped and I said, back. And I went out into the treatment area, and it was almost like I was in this glass box and everyone was moving around me, but I couldn't. It was like I was paralyzed. And it was at that point that I reached out to my advisor and medical director and explained to her the situation. And she came and reported me. Then she said, "You need to take a break." And I said, "No, no, no, no. I gotta just keep working. I gotta just keep, I don't want to give up on my patients. I can't leave my team." And she said, "You need to get well." And I thank her so much because I was able to take time. I was able to process what happened, right? And I was able to come back better. But because of what I went through, I consider myself to be a survivor of that, because we know in our profession, it breaks my time. I hear about us losing another colleague, but it's a very real to address, and we need to pay attention to. And we need to support our people in a way where we understand that it is okay to step away and to process and deal with that frustration, that heavy weight. I'm also very religious, and that helped tremendously as well. And my mentor also as well. And so that she was able to talk with me about scripture and stuff like that and into that. But that played a tremendous was as well. And so when I talked to Doc about overcoming compassion fatigue and burnout and tragedy, that it's a process. It takes time. I think sometimes we tell ourselves a story that, oh, this would be a quick, right? This bounce back ability. I got the ability to bounce back. I can do this. I see these patients all day. I can get through this, right? And the truth of the matter, some of these things are so heavy and go so deep that you need to really walk it out. And that is okay. That doesn't make you a weak person, make you less of a doctor. It actually sets you up for success. Other side, I'm better off now, and I can handle things much better and differently. I am more compassionate. I think that as veterinarians, we do need to have that, especially as male veterinarians. We do need to have that passion that really helps us to address the patients and others that we see every day and the doctors that we work with.
When you say you have more compassion, it sounds like you're meaning in the context of maybe your clients, or do you mean more compassion towards yourself, or both?
And all the above,
Yeah.
right? More compassion for myself. So I give myself more grace, give myself more space to feel. My family, how I approach my daughters. I approach them from a position now of seek to understand. And when it comes to my patient owners, again, that seek to understand. And hey, it's okay that you may not completely sure how important diet is, right? And stuff like that, and exercise. And so it's given me this muscle to approach the situation from a place of love, right? Because I've had to develop this muscle of self-love, right? And so now that I love myself much better, It's much easier for me to love others through their times, through their challenges, through those sticky points.
Yeah. And you mentioned especially male veterinarians, and you have become very dedicated to supporting males in general. I think you've dedicated a lot of supporting other men, and I think this is coming from a female, but there's a lot of lack of support. I think for in general, and it's unique from you too because you started out with kind of a lack of male support. So you know what that's like and the importance of it. And I also think it's kind of funny that your first job you landed with a bunch of men. So you were able to get some male counterparts though. And I asked you a question in our pre-call about the lack of men that are coming into veterinary medicine too. And I was like, you're the perfect person, I think, to ask this question is like, why do you think that is? And so from your perspective, someone who is very passionate about supporting, men in general and looking at the evolution of our profession and we're just getting less and less men in this profession. Why do you think that is? And what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a concern for me because you're spot there's fewer male entering the profession. I do think that it's something that we need to pay attention to, but in reference to why I think there's this shift, I think that one, the profession itself has shifted into a very emotional streamline where, for example, fear free, you take your time with fear free. You have to lean into it a little bit differently. And one of the things that as I travel around and I speak to various capacities, there's this part, and not every male is going to willingly say this openly. But our culture tells, right, that we can't show emotion. So if something happens, we need to be strong, you need to man up, and you need to push through. Even I remember being a young kid and my uncle would be like, you better not cry. Wipe your face and get back out there. And that stays with us for a long time and to our adult lives. As a result of that, there's this lack of emotional intelligence. And I'm not saying men aren't intelligent, they're very intelligent. What I mean by that is that emotional component, we actually bury that, we push that down, and we don't really deal with or focus in or lean into those soft skills. Okay, I need to be more compassionate. I need to love a little bit more. I need to be more sensitive. Like if you tell a man you need to be more, they may take that offensively, right? And so our profession, as it's pivoted to have more women in it, which is awesome and great, it has developed this muscle, this area that requires more emotional intelligence. You need to be more compassionate with the owners. You need to be more sensitive with that. And those are all terms that actually are turnoffs for most males, right? Oh, what do you mean? I got to be more sensitive. What do you mean? I just want to, treat and go home. You know, I don't want to deal with that. The other aspect of it is when it comes to salary. I do think that there's an area that we need to really look into as far as veterinarians being paid and valued as they should. I do think there's a number of situations where veterinarians are undervalued and males don't take that very well. I think women are a little bit more understanding. We don't have that patience. And there's so many other opportunities of making money in other ways. So there's a lot that goes into being a veterinarian. It's not an easy job at all. Sometimes I feel like I'm a psychologist, right? But I think that we need to reignite that fire, and if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And I just have to comment. You say women are sometimes more patient. You make that sound like a good characteristic. Sometimes that we're criticized for that because we're not advocating for those wages and things. But so, you're saying teaching more emotional intelligence and soft skills might help. But if some of these things that are, changing in the profession, and I see that it definitely can be more an emotional profession than it was a decade ago, because our our patients are now being seen as family members, and so it becomes more an emotional situation because pets are seen in a more emotional way. So
Yes.
if some of the problem is just it just doesn't sound like something they want to do, how might we encourage people before they're already in vet school and we need to teach these skills? Like, how can we make it sound like still something that and are going to thrive and feel good in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. We need to improve how we present veterinary medicine. To your point, 100% correct. Pets are seen as part of the family. And as a result of that, there's this massive emotional component that comes with it. And males just ideally don't like to deal with that, right? But I do think that we can approach this and improve this by one, speaking about the many avenues the profession offers. For a very long time, I really thought that there was only one avenue, and it's to go into clinics in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But there's so many different aspects of veterinary medicine, so many things you can do. I have a classmate that is not just a veterinarian, but she's an attorney, right? And she's loving what she's, you know, talking about becoming a nutritionist. Like, men like to be fit gym, things like that. That's masculine. That's an approach you can take. I think that would have went over well. I competed as a natural bodybuilder at one point, and so nutrition was massively important that time, and even to this day, it's still something that is important. Even though from time to time I go on this stop binge pepper wings, don't tell anyone. But speaking more about what's out there in our profession is such a vast, and so by doing that, it will then allow males to see how they fit into that. We're going and speak to a group of high schools. And when I go and I speak to students, I often talk about the many aspects of veterinary medicine, right? And I was showing some models to talk about anatomy. And a young man came up to me and he just so shocked. He said, wait a second. I actually have a business where I'm doing 3D models. Actually counted out being a veterinarian because I couldn't connect those dots. You mean I can create these? Yes, you can create models, right? And be a veterinarian. He was like, you just blew my mind. I really had cut out and thinking about being a veterinarian, and I was just going to go and just do business, right? So I think by doing that, we will little by little improve male turnout and interest in veterinary medicine. And in addition to that, I think that we need to expose the youth to veterinary medicine. The other aspect of that is that a lot of individuals and children in the inner city, they have no idea. When I go and speak in the city, they go, you're a Black veterinarian? What do you, I don't understand do that. So exposure, I think, also plays a key role in turning that around.
Well, I promise I did not know what you were going to say, but I'm glad to hear that, since again, that's the mission of Vet Life Reimagined. So share the podcast and maybe we can help. But it's so funny that you say that. And I kind of wonder if one of the guys who came up to you about the 3D models is someone I've had on the podcast. I've had two guy veterinarians who have gone into where their complete jobs are 3D modeling in relation to veterinary medicine. And one of them, he majored in bioengineering. So yeah, he came at from an engineering perspective into veterinary medicine. He's a veterinarian, and now he does this. And I've interviewed so many men who are extremely entrepreneurial. They've started businesses, all sorts of things. I have to actually go back and see what my proportion is from girls and boys for my guests. I actually feel like it might be somewhat even, because I really do. I find people with unique career paths, and they just, they're just whoever they are. But yeah, like there are so many different things, and it is so much fun to highlight all these different areas of veterinary medicine that can appeal to so many different backgrounds. Again, I think that's one of the neat things about our profession is there's so many different options to live out what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but colleagues have found those unique paths and actually live filled life. So it is definitely possible. We just got to put it out there and make people aware that it's available.
Yeah. Well, I love this story that you shared with me so much. And I think it's somewhat of a good segue, because it is talking about emotions, because I think pets bring out some of these emotions in us, like we've been talking about, and even for ourselves. And I love that you shared with me that your favorite dog is a pug. And do you mind sharing a little bit of Brownie and your history with pugs?
Yes. Yeah. If a pug comes into the room, hands down, I'm going for the pug, and it fills my heart. And so I was doing a surgical external, and I had Brownie with me, and Brownie would love to go walking around, being the surgical patients and letting them know, hey, everything's going to be all right. You're going to get through this. And, one day, one of the technicians came in. She had adopted 2 boys from Cambodia. And when one of them saw, they said dog. And it was one of the first words that they've ever said. And so it was a very emotional time. She crying. Everyone's like, oh my God. But at that point in time, I knew Brownie's purpose was to go with that family. But now every pug to me is Brownie. So I absolutely love pugs. Pretty soon, I talked to my daughter about what type of breed we're going to get. And I told them, there's no negotiations because my daughter has allergies. But I said, when she goes to college, it's Pug City. Although I might battle because my youngest wants to be a veterinarian. She loves Dalmatians. So she has a million Dalmatian stuff. So we may have to battle that one out.
Well, maybe a Dalmatian and a pug will get together. They're very different, but I don't know. We'll have to see.
And the magnitude of issues in both, right? So,
Yeah. Good thing you're a veterinarian.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This has been an amazing conversation. The time has just flown by. The last question I want to ask, though, is what is something that you're very grateful for right now?
I'm very grateful to continue to move forward. So many people give up and they give in. And throughout my life, there's been ups and downs, but I've also wanted to take an approach of failing forward. So you can't prevent yourself from falling down, right? But you can prevent yourself from getting up. And so I always fight to get up and continue to move forward. And so I'm grateful to be able to continue to move forward and grow and meet amazing people along the journey like yourself. I'm able to continue to do things with people that I love.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn, where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn,
on the website at vetlifereimagined.com. And brand new is that you can text me. To send me a text message, find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.